So hello, my name is Dewayne Davis. I'm an educator by trade. Been in education for about 29 years. I've been in politics for about 20 years, starting as far back as a neighborhood council member, moving into assembly as representative in delegations. What got me involved in politics per se as a black platform is I see oftentimes the interests and issues of black Americans are typically moved to the side. Uh, we're oftentimes couched with other groups and organizations and interests under the term of people of color. And when that happens, our issues and interests become diluted, if at all are heard. And I felt like we needed to make certain that we had a place that spoke directly for and about black issues and black interests.
Many people feel their vote doesn't matter, especially people in red states. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I would say they could be no further from the truth. You know, you absolutely need to be involved. If you're not involved, then you really don't count. And that's not just cliche. If you decide to and elect to not be a part of it, then there's no reason to listen to you, listen to your interests, or listen to your issues. And so when I hear folks say that, you know, the individuals are going to do what they want to do, well, they do what they want to do because you're not at the table. And there's a saying, you're either at the table or you're on the table. And so I'd much rather be at the table and make certain that black issues and interests are at the table than them not being there and being discarded. Know this, they're still going to take your tax dollars from your check. They're still going to use your money to do something. And so you need to make certain that whatever services and supports your community needs, you need to make certain you voice those and voice them loudly so that you receive and your family can receive and your community can receive what's necessary and due for it to be prosperous.
How important is the black vote?
You know, the black vote is really important, more so for us. As you can look at our communities and you see how blight many of them could be, as you see the needs of our communities as well as black Americans themselves, without our vote, without us being engaged, we won't receive anything. And so it's important for us more specifically. But even on the larger scheme of things, we're 13% of the nation. Those individuals that may be running for office, 13% is enough to sway a vote, to sway an election in one way or the other. But we have to make certain that we're demanding certain things and requiring of candidates a platform that's going to address our needs. And so when we are involved and engaged, we tend to receive the things that we need. But we also have to make certain that we're not only participating on the front end, but making certain that we're vigilant and watchful throughout the entire time the individuals are in office.
Can you break down the Electoral College for us?
Well, basically every state is represented there. When it was devised or thought of, is the purpose behind it was to make certain that the popular vote wasn't easily swayed. But it seems like these days the Electoral College is easily swayed. And so each state has a number of representatives that meet and convene and help select the president of the United States. There's 538. And of those, you needed more than 270 to become president of the United States. But again, as I mentioned to you, it's really to make certain that the popular vote isn't swayed, ergo, by the popularity of an individual. But as I mentioned before, it seems that that is what transpired in our last election. And that being said, the Electoral College was swayed by and became the more popular vote than those that voted.
What are the topics on the Georgia ballot that you feel black voters should pay attention to?
You know, Georgia doesn't have a lot of initiatives this year. There's two. One is we're really paying attention to is initiative number 2, and it's surrounding Georgia's sovereignty. And what that does is basically, if it passes, it allows individuals to sue the state. Right now, Georgia basically is indemnified as a state for whatever wrongdoings it may enact on other individuals. And so if this was to pass, then think about all of the times and crimes that we see happening to African Americans, black Americans, at the hands of the government, at the hands of law enforcement. Those individuals now have the right, will if this was to pass, will then have the right to sue the state and seek justice in that terms. And so it's a big deal because Georgia is no longer protected as a state itself. Let's see how far it goes. Let's see how much weight it has. But that's the big one for us of the two.
What are the topics on the Baltimore ballot that you feel Black voters should do their research on?
I wouldn't say so much Baltimore has any topics that really resonate with Black America. I mean, there's the gaming one. There's the one on gaming. There's another one regarding the legislature and the power of the legislature. But I think what's more important is that Baltimore recognizing that, Maryland, Baltimore's recognizing that they have a congressional seat open. They pay attention to that race. The person that's in the seat more than likely will win, more so because Baltimore is a stronghold of a Democratic stronghold. I believe it's like 73% Democrat, as well as it is equally Black American. But the challenger, who is a Republican, who I'm certain will get her head handed to her by the sitting individual, does bring up some points that Baltimore does need to consider when they're thinking about how they will hold their elected officials responsible and accountable. If you looked at the race any bit of time, her name is Kim Clackett. She brings up some points. Baltimore has been in disarray for decades, according to individuals I have spoken to, and even as I've visited myself. And so when do we hold individuals that we're giving our vote to accountable to us, as opposed to voting in a traditional sense because they are considered a Democrat? That's not to say that I'm endorsing her or him. It's just to say, something to think about. And as you said, do some research on Baltimore, do some research on what the needs of Baltimore are, and make certain that we are holding individuals responsible and accountable to us as a constituent base and to the community.
What are the topics on the Los Angeles ballot that you feel the Black voters should do their due diligence on?
California has a litany of measures. They have about 24, 25. One that I really think everyone should pay attention to, and it hasn't got a lot of traction because it's a legislature-sponsored measure, is Proposition 16, which is basically repealing Prop 209. In essence, basically reinstating affirmative action in California. I believe 1994, when Prop 209 was passed, basically canceled out affirmative action, and it was billed to everyone as a civil rights bill. It was a civil rights bill. It was about canceling civil rights. And many individuals, unbeknownst to them, voted in favor of it and ultimately did themselves harm. And so this is to make certain that we make amends for that and repair that point in life for Californians, and make certain that we can provide some equity and diversity in some of our government contracts as well as our universities and job employment.
If you could control the media conversation about politics, what areas of politics would you cover and why?
I think I would change it more around the narrative of Black America. A lot of the struggles and strife we receive is based on how people perceive Black Americans and Black. I would even say and venture to say that Black Americans are scared of the word Black. Not all of them, but some. And you can see it when you say the word, and some of them tiptoe around just those kind of conversations, and even the word Black. If you think about the word itself, it has a negative connotation. We got black cats, and so forth and so on. And so that would be what I would control, so that we can dispel the myth of Black being a negative point, as well as it being viewed in a negative light. I think that will go a long way in helping us, as well as helping America, think of Black Americans as Americans, and as well as individuals that should have full rights and responsibilities as anyone does, as well as the communities in which they live.
What is the importance of understanding the Senate and Congress?
The Senate is part of Congress. There's two parts to the Congress, one being the Senate, the other one is being the House of Representatives. And so understanding that Senate is not independent of Congress, it is a part of Congress. That's important that folks understand that. And overall and ultimately, they are individuals that we as constituents elect to represent us. And the importance of that is we make certain we elect individuals that have our interests in heart and has our community at heart. Otherwise, we will never ever be able to move beyond where we are. It's important that we make certain that we know their background, of the individuals that are running for those offices, so that we aren't misled or deceived because they've shown up at a church one day and kissed a baby and shook a hand and smiled at us as individuals, and we thought that he or she was a good individual and was about black issues and interests. Oftentimes that's the first and last time we see them, and that should be an indicator number one, if it's the first and last time you've ever seen them. And so think about Congress as a whole, but also more importantly, think about those individuals that are running for those offices in Congress.
What do you think is the biggest hindrance to the education of black voters?
A lot of us, not all, a lot of individuals believe that our vote doesn't count. They believe that we have been disenfranchised, and whatever those individuals are in power want to do, they're going to do anyway. And that's so far from the truth, to the point where now we've believed it, internalized it, and now are disenfranchising ourselves, and they don't even need to say anything to us. And so that's the biggest piece to me around educating black Americans around voting.
What do you think is the biggest hindrance to the unification within the black community?
The biggest hindrance to the unification of the black community right now, I would say us. You know, we have a learned behavior, I would say, to where we now work against our own interests or not work in our interests at all. You know, there was a phrasing, and it shouldn't have been said, but it was said by candidate Joe Biden, that, you know, if he said, if you're a black American and you don't vote for me, you're not black. Well, yeah, that's not quite accurate. That's not quite true. But I will say this, because we're such a small group, we do need to unify, and we do need to be very much in a monolithic mindset so that we can purport our own issues. When we are already disenfranchised and we have so many divergent views, it makes it difficult for the community or the collective to move forward. And so that's my point of interest, and that's one of the reasons why I really want folks to understand how Congress works and how voting works. You know, individually, your vote is just a vote, but collectively, you can have some power and make some decisions and impact some elections as well as measures.
How do we create a reform in the laws that protect those that have unjustly murdered people due to implicit bias? For example, the officers who killed Breonna Taylor.
I would say every state has its own way in which it accepts reform measures. You know, in California has one of the more progressive ways where a lot of our measures can come from the citizen or citizen interest, where individuals will gather enough signatures to place something on the ballot, or gather enough signatures to where it's sent to the legislature, and the legislature looks at it, reviews it, and can do certain things from that standpoint. And so that's the way you can do it. Now, I would say in Georgia, looking at Georgia doesn't have that type of instrument. And so, again, it depends on what state you're speaking on. But overall, I think if we do some things collectively, nationally, then we can put some things in and make some national reforms that will make certain that our interests and our health and our safety is primarily number one to everyone.
How are laws written? Who writes the laws? How do we become law writers?
How are laws written? Well, it all starts with an issue. You know, sometimes you'll see an issue, and many of the laws that you see are spin-offs of other issues. And so how do you write a law? Well, anybody can write a law, but then at that point in time, you have to get enough individuals behind it to where they can agree that, yeah, it's an issue and it needs to be a law. From that standpoint, then you move it to, if you've seen the Saturday cartoons, move it to Capitol Hill, or in whatever state you're in, move it to that state's hill. At that point in time, it's then reviewed, given a docket number, reviewed, thought about if there's some validity to it, and discussed. If it's seen as something that is of interest and that there's enough public support for it, then it's put onto the ballot, as you will see for California this year, as well as for Georgia and Maryland, since we're speaking about those other two states as well. From there, it's basically put out as a question. Is this something that you want? Is this something that you don't want? And then as as private citizens, we vote for and say yes, it's something that we want, or no, it's something that we don't want. Once it's voted on, either yay or nay, it either becomes law or not. Hi, my name is Dewayne Davis of blackplatform.org. Thank you for listening to me today on WeVibe Network. It's epic.